Dr. Zhou, as the final medical team to return to Chongqing from Wuhan, and after a fortnight of quarantine and recuperation in Nanchang, how are you feeling now?
I'm really happy that we can converse today. I'm feeling relaxed and I'm in really good health. I'm also very touched by the show of concern our medical team has received, so I've thought about writing something to record this recent experience, and a professional summary too.
How did you feel when you received the call to Wuhan?
Because I was already involved in a group COVID-19 treatment at a designated hospital in Chongqing, so I had some familiarity with the illness and experience with the treatment. On the 2 days of February 11th and 12th, there was a sharp increase in confirmed cases, so they called for emergency assistance. Their reports made it clear that they were required more ICU specialists like ourselves, so there was only one thought at a time: hurry to the aid of Wuhan with the team I headed as soon as possible to treat this serious respiratory disease.
The COVID-19 outbreak came suddenly. Where did you obtain reliable information, and how did you formulate a course of treatment?
Information came through a unified government source, which was prompt, open and transparent, and our medical team leadership also provided the latest data. A team of treatment specialists nationwide produced a handbook that compiled our past experience in relevant treatment, coupled with treatment outcomes with current COVID-19 patients and clinical discoveries. These were used to formulate and revise treatment plans. So, to date, there have been a total of 7 editions detailing the course of treatment, which we all summarized and added to in the next edition so we could offer patients more scientific treatment. However, in ICU, we formulated personalized treatment plans, one for each ICU patient. After we arrived in Wuhan, we took responsibility for 2 ICU wards.
Did you find there was a shortage of resources and equipment? How did you remedy the situation?
The outbreak happened first, so there was shortages in protective gear, ventilators and other items we needed that depleted quickly. We had to coordinate with other wards, hospitals and operational centers in hope of receiving what we needed by sharing our needs with respect to supply and demand. Then regrouping time was short. Within 2 days we made it through a period with limited resources.
Can you share any experience on how you reduced the death rate?
In practical terms, the ICU is the most critical area as the success of treatment and death rates are directly correlated. So over the period of clinical action, we set up an early warning system for potential ICU patients, which in turn improved our ability to identify and screen them. This was a point we repeatedly emphasized during clinical work, so we can promptly screen for ICU patients and recognize a patient's transmission form from a heavy sufferer to ICU status. This clinical process increased the effectiveness of treatment. For such cases, in an environment where patients are concentrated, only here can teams of specialists oversee large numbers of patients and recognize serious cases quickly. We also conducted joint discussions to formulate individualized plans for the serious patients we mentioned just before. Of course, there were times we carried out procedures like intubations, evasive mechanical ventilations, and ECMO treatment, etc. These were all performed thanks to this method of observation, discussion with colleagues at the point of treatment, joint analysis to strive for the best course of physical treatment. We did have some fatalities, of course. For those who treatment failed, we promptly convened to discuss the case and quickly formulate a conclusion. Why did treatment fail for some patients, and what lessons could we draw from these? Our experience accumulated over the course of the epidemic, which allows us to update the treatment guidelines quickly and individualize treatment through clinical discussions.
Were any of your medical team at great risk of infection?
Overall, members who hurried to the aid of Wuhan carried a psychological burden. The main reasons were unfamiliarity with the disease and how to protect themselves. So when we arrived at the medical establishment, a priority was to instruct the team on protective measures. Were anybody to experience sign of illnesses, our medical team could respond as a unit to make sure that everybody performs their duty in a fit state of mind. As for the wearing and removal of protective gear, we stipulated that everybody followed the correct procedure so that there were 0 errors due to carelessness. This way, we assured that our medical team, all 160 members of them, didn't show any signs of illness. This was vitally important.
How was your relationship with patients?
Our mentality during our time in Wuhan was to successfully complete our medical assignment, so when our medical team arrived there and began accepting patients, they were extremely grateful to us for coming so far to help treat their illness. For us personally, this was simply our duty, but there were some interesting occasions that moved us deeply, such as the first patient one of our doctors saw who kept telling us to keep a distance out of concern that we'd be infected. So our doctors said not to worry, that our protective gear is very good, we will help you recover. We found instances like these to be very touching. Also, there are some differences between Wuhan and Chongqing, such as the local dialects. So as we communicated with the patients in order to encourage them, we made a pact to teach each other some local phrases. For example, when I met my first patient, I said Wuhan xiongqi, come on Wuhan, which is a Chongqing dialect. I then asked him to teach me something. He told me he was a Wuhan local. Chongqing is a mountain city and Wuhan is a river city, but the Yangtze River has always been a link between us. We had already been in Wuhan 16 days during this time. We cared deeply for these patients and worked closely with fellow doctors from Wuhan. Wanting to learn from each other, and some of them observed how we treated the patients, this told us a number of things. First, we did everything possible to treat our patients. Secondly, the patients who had already recovered are aware of this, and after such an experience, they still keep in touch with us over WeChat. Third, during our work treating COVID-19, especially from the angle of ICU, we continued to observe the cases of seriously ill patients and the effectiveness of treatment, which was a difficult clinical task but also a highly valuable experience. This is part of the course. The need to summarize our experience is also of great importance.
Now the pandemic abroad is now very serious. Do you have any experience you'd like to share with medical personnel overseas?
In this respect, while China now has the outbreak under control, the pressure on workers overseas is very high. But as I try to gather my thoughts over the past 3 months based on my experience in fighting the epidemic, I think in the case of a contagious disease, cutting the lines of infection is the most important. In pandemic hotspots, I think there are 2 points of commonality with Wuhan which could be effective elsewhere. The first is controlling the outbreak area, whether it be city lockdowns or the management of residential complexes. The most vital aspect is preventing further spread, as this stops infection pathways. The second point is more technical, which is the use of mobile field hospitals, where patients can be isolated outside of the family home where the risk of infection is an issue. Through setting up mobile field hospitals, we can control the spread of infection from daily people already confirmed with the virus with good effect. Moreover, they allow us to assess the level of care patients require. Are they serious or mild cases, and what are the resources needed? From this point of view, mobile field hospitals are very effective.
Do you have anything you'd like to say to our audience abroad?
I think everyone is doing their best to fight the epidemic, but on an individual level, the need to manage oneself well is such as wearing masks, washing hands, keeping a safe distance for 1 meter should be a fundamental aspect of our daily lives. If we can make good on these things, we can at least say to ourselves, I've done my part. So no matter whether you're on the front line or not, as long as everyone makes an effort, they will have made a contribution. From another point of view, we need to take care of our environment, Mother Nature.
Let's put our differences aside and fight the epidemic together. I hope you stayed positive and normality will resume again soon.